Hello, and welcome to Replay Value. Steins Gate is based around the question of why is Okabe's memory different than everyone else's in the first two episodes? We are prompted to this question in the first episode, and it is mostly shelved in the second, instead choosing to affirm what remains shared between the cast, which is exemplified by the rapid expansion of the character web. But that shaky connection to the question is frankly a weakness, since it doesn't share the defining principle that the first episode had structurally. Steins Gate begins to answer the memory question in episode 1 as Okabe says that his text traveled through time, but episode 2 opens with Kurisu completely slamming the door shut on the idea of time travel being possible. And outside of Taiter, who exists more to show how Okabe's memories are different, that answer is completely dropped. In episode 3, we seem to affirm Okabe's initial answer, or at least partially, in the opening half of Parallel World Paranoia, at which point the new defining question fully transitions to, is time travel truly possible, and is that the case of this microwave? The evolution of the foundational question is typical for a thriller, and the progression on questions gives the story a sense of building towards grander plot threads, even as the character web continues to deepen the interpersonal relationships. Unsurprisingly, the third episode has a similar structure to the first episode, two clear halves. The first of which is based in experimentation, which gives us that partial answer to the question regarding Okabe's memory, and the second half is the development of what exactly this revelation means for the upcoming story, and gives our cast a clear goal to achieve just in time for the cliffhanger. And that, unsurprisingly, requires us to pick up right where we left off in the second episode. The reappearance of Makise Kurisu instantly re-raises the question of the memory gap. She is the literal embodiment of it, and is unofficially at the center of all of the weird stuff that's been happening. Both the thriller section of the first episode and the transposed state of the Gel Nana, which after a brief reintroduction, she quickly investigates. Okabe's initial discomfort around Kurisu is palpable, maybe best shown in his inability to shake her hand, and her following retort empowered by her now visible eyes. But that discomfort is pretty quickly overtaken by their bickering, who, even as they disagree and tease each other, are more or less on the same page. That transition from confrontational spinning and isolated side layouts to unified framing indicates that Kurisu is going to agree to Okabe's terms before she even does so, to join the lab. Mayuri rejoins the following scene, and her first meeting with Kurisu indicates how warm and welcoming she is. Her excitement as she sprints towards the camera, Kurisu is centered in her landing position for the following shot, is a nice little characterization moment. Another fun direction moment that happened earlier was Suzuha downstairs changing channels on the TV. It achieves three narrative purposes in one clever element. A reminder of the crash, the key element at dispute in Okabe's memory, a subtle bit of double foreshadowing, and a transition back to the core storyline. The actual experiment begins with re-establishing that one of the last tests coincided with Okabe leaving after Kurisu was stabbed, using the exact same shot in the callback as the one that led to the split memory. And even in this conversation, it becomes clear what's going to happen next, what with that text having been received allegedly a week prior. And just like the previous experiments, the outcome is completely inconsistent with what should be feasible. The microwave creating enough power to smash the table in half, a table thick enough, mind you, to make a hole in the floor? That's insane if the lightning wasn't enough to show you that something was up. Notably, Okabe's priority is to protect Mayuri, diving on top of her and making sure she's okay before anyone or anything else. The smoke that fills the room slowly leaves the atmosphere as Okabe comes to his conclusion as though his vision is clearing, declaring, to Kurisu and Daru's shock, that the microwave is a time machine. What's most interesting about this development is how it recontextualizes some of the previous episode's disparate plot threads. John Taiter on @channel arguing with Nakabachi and Kurisu about the feasibility of time travel. These previous events are immediately given weight and clear narrative applicability by the declaration that they've created a time machine. That's most instantly made clear when Daru is looking at the LHC and Okabe immediately thinks of Taiter talking about CERN's monopoly in the future. The weaving of these seemingly irrelevant conversations suddenly come together when discussing the potential of the LHC producing miniature black holes. That lending to a time travel theory that Okabe brought up, and Kurisu having 86'd that idea. If not for his current theory, none of these elements would be worth exploring further, but with time travel a feasible proposition on the table, investigating CERN in line with Teacher's declaration seems almost necessary. Especially given their own microwave experiments have hit a dead end, something equated notably with Kurisu's excision from the second half. Also, the way this shot is framed as Okabe is exiting to give both characters priority at different moments in the shot is a breath of fresh air, especially in a series of shot, reverse shot, and them on opposite sides of the screen. Then with Tighter, while it does a lot of the same visualization effects that we talked about in episode 2, the primary purpose of this scene is no longer to highlight that Okabe recalled a 2000s Tighter, while this version claims that to not be the case, and no longer having the books about the first appearance, but rather to reinforce the time travel aspect and to tee up the IBN 5100 for future plot relevance. It also slyly reestablishes the partial answer that the microwave asserted regarding Okabe's memories, as Tighter explains how moving between world lines causes memories to change. There's a conversation between the lunch and Tighter with Suzuha, but it's mainly just providing more context. Suzuha states two things the audience is already aware of, the name of the lab and their interest in CERN, before connecting Moeka's search with Tighter via the IBN. A multitude of shots here use a low-angle perspective to show off the blue sky, which will tie in nicely in a moment. That also empowers the close-ups, like when Okabe gasps in shock, and Suzuha when she isn't sure how to respond regarding her knowledge of the 5100. And that brings us back to the blue sky, with Mayuri and Okabe on the roof eating their Odin. Mayuri under the umbrella implies that she's being protected from the sun, the embodiment of natural law, while Okabe is taking the full brunt of it. This isn't immediately represented in their discussion because Okabe is very forward about the hacking, he's not holding things back from her. But it does thematically show the protective side of their relationship that has been shown in dialogue and actions to this point. Their trade of food both shows that Mayuri is willing to take a partial loss for Okabe's sake, he gets his favorite while she gets the mere consolation prize, and there's another inversion of cause and effect as he takes the beef strip before she could even agree. Another impression that he knows her just that well. You could also make the case that this is him taking advantage of their friendship, something not entirely without merit given the treatment of her food in the experiments, but that is probably better represented in the give and take that this trade sequence exemplifies, what with Mayuri putting on a big smile as a result. But that brings us to Daru, who has successfully hacked into CERN, shouting, "Mission complete!" I like that the computer screen is viewed at an angle or really zoomed in. Certain keywords get focused, but there's a lack of the bigger picture, which is accurate to their initial foray into the emails. But the cliffhanger, represented by a brief flash of keywords in red and a hyper low angle from the table cutting off all of our characters at their waists, signals that there's some concern. After all, the words read, "Error, human is dead, mismatch." But that's enough for now. Next time on Operation Yggdrasil, we jump back into episode 4, see why the IBN was teed up so much in this episode, and explore one of the greatest strategic battles in anime with Operation G-Back. But until then, L, Sci, Conquer.